Hello, this is Jed Brewer with Below the Line Club and Study Groups. Very nice to have you on the call today as we discuss the rise of fuel prices. As we all know, gasoline prices are up quite a bit. We had a study group member send out a notice recently to his fellow members saying, hey, we got these old mechanical pumps. I just want you to know they don't go above $5.99. And he was starting to run into that limit. Hard to believe that we're thinking of prices that high in some areas of the country, but that's the reality of the place that we live today. Maybe they'll go down to further tomorrow, or maybe they'll go back up more. We don't know, but one thing we do know is when prices go up, more bad debt tends to happen. AR costs go up, inventory carrying costs go up, and cash becomes king. And a lot of our marketers right now are looking to make sure they have available lines of credit and that cash to keep the business moving forward as is. So really happy that we have three folks that are really focused on cash and how we can get more of it in our bank accounts in this time of rising prices and protect us in some ways from bad debt exposures when our customers may run out of cash as well. So the three people, you see them here. One is Pavan Maheshwari. He is the founder and CEO of FleetPanda. And Pavan is going to talk a little bit about getting paid as soon as possible with order-to-cash automation. And their firm really works. They're a Silicon Valley-based startup, but do a lot of work helping firms in our industry get better automated in this order-to-cash process, how to be first in line to get paid, if you have any leaky pipelines, how to get that corrected, and avoid garbage in, garbage out scenarios. So excited to have Pavan talk here in just a second. But following him will be Cory Watson, who's president of Leykell Insurance, which is a credit insurance company. Cory is going to be talking about how we can use both credit insurance and micro bonding, if you've never heard of micro bonding, to help us with our receivable exposure and our shrinking lines of credit that we may have out there with banks as fuel prices get higher. So Cory will be very interested in what you have to say. And then lastly, Ann Pitts, who's the founder of the Pitts Group and one of our study group facilitators. Ann is going to be talking about your game plan for your credit department, what you need to have in place in times of stress like now. So evaluating customer red flags, creating a credit review system, exercising superior credit collection efforts as well, and some metrics around that. So should be a really good webinar. I'll start to be quiet here and let our presenters talk. I want to let you know that we want this to be as educational as possible. After this, we'll send out the slides and the contact information for each of our presenters. But if you have any questions throughout, please type that into your dialog box in the GoToWebinar setting. I'll be able to read those questions and I can pass them on to our presenters, and we'll do our best to get them answered on the webinar. If we can't address it on the webinar, we can always do it offline afterwards too. So with that introduction, Pavan, I'll turn it over to you and talk a little bit about how we can get paid as soon as possible with order-to-cash automation.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Jed, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
All right. So first of all, thanks, Jed, for bringing this amazing group of people together, really to talk about this very important and timely topic. Everyone involved with Below the Line Club and Study Group, I have a special respect for you guys because, you're here saying that we need to learn new concepts. We need to understand benchmarks from our peers in the industry and open up our minds to new framework. And I really admire that. Before we jump into sort of the presentation, I'd like to give just a very quick background on FleetPanda so you have a little bit of context on us. So it's an interesting story for us. I really came from a different world in the industry because I used to be in software engineering roles at Amazon, creating logistics software, and then worked at Salesforce and Workday and a couple of other tech and product companies here in Silicon Valley. And we ended up raising venture capital to start a fuel distribution company. And that was growing really fast a few years back. And with fast growth it brings its own challenges. So a lot of our operations was constantly breaking, and we looked at the industry to figure out, well, what kind of software is out there to really help us. really what we saw was really old clunky systems that cost you 20, 30 grand per truck, and nowhere close to the technology we were used to using at Amazon. So, our board decided to really create this end-to-end system. And, a few years back, we sold the trucking side of our business and really went all in on creating the software to create this order to cash automation basically and precisely for this industry. So my goal today is to really leave you guys with one or two key frameworks, or what I like to call mental models, that would help you rethink about your business and help you in making some very high leverage changes to your operation. Right. The first mental model that I'd like you to think about is, imagine you have an order pipeline. Right. It's a simple concept. On one side, order goes in. On the other side, cash comes out. Right? We all want this. Your customers are placing orders, and if you are fulfilling those orders on time and the way they asked, then you get cash fast. Right? Now, there's a challenge here, because you may have a leaky order pipeline. Meaning, and what's a leaky pipeline? A leaky order pipeline is pretty much every time in this order to cash process, if you have pen and paper, if you have spreadsheets, if you have people who have to make decisions and pass context around and, sort of understand what's really going on, then basically at each of these spots, you have a leak, because you could have an error, you could have a slowdown, you could have confusion, and, the knowledge sort of really to make these orders get through the pipeline is really locked into just few people's head, right? So that's the kind of mental model around, well, do you have an order to cash automation? If not, then how many leaks you have, because you're leaking a lot of cash, and it's also slowing you down because you're kind of getting backlogged, and you can look into your own how long it's taking you to send out invoices, reconciliation, and things like that, right? So now I may have your attention on that. So let's quickly just map what could be a possible order pipeline for you, right? And it's a very simple concept. On one side, you have, the order is born, right? And then the order gets enhanced. To that order, basically you're adding which supplier to pull from, who pulls it, what is the pickup point code, things like that. And then the order gets scheduled. You do some kind of shift planning, right? And your dispatchers are deciding who's going to process that order at what time. And then the order gets sent to the driver, right? And this can happen in many ways. Maybe you're just printing out papers and handing it to them. We've seen some of our customers who used to literally send out fax. So we've seen all kind of stuff right now in the industry. But then the order eventually makes it to the hand of the driver, right? And then the driver reviews the order, and hopefully he understands he has all the context required to fulfill that order, right? Maybe he doesn't know what the gate code is when he goes to the gate. He doesn't know, like, if he can't enter the premise, whom to call, right? There's all these things that he needs to really fulfill that order properly. Once the order is fulfilled, all this paperwork is then collected from the field, right? They're bringing hundreds of documents, your BOL images, your delivery tickets, and, what went in, and what is the return on the truck, and things like that. All that gets then reconciled, right? And I feel like reconciliation is just a fancy word of figuring out what happened during the order delivery. We just really figured out what really happened, so that we can get to a point where we feel like things are in order, and then we push all that information to the back office system. And then you send the invoices, and then you eventually get paid, right? So that's generally, in some form, your order pipeline, right? And really, once you get this concept that you have an order pipeline, and if you don't have automation, you have pen and paper, then basically you have leaks. And if that's leaking, then your order to cash, your time to cash is not good, right? You're not sending invoices fast enough. You're not collecting cash fast enough. You're not first in line to get paid, right?
Pavan, where are the most common leaks in this process? Maybe you're going to get into that, but I'm just curious, high level, most common leaks you see for petroleum marketers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one piece is sort of, they often have orders coming in from 4 different directions, right? They have people calling in for an order. they have emails coming in. Sometimes there are tag monitors, and they have dispatchers who are monitoring those orders, and they have recurring orders. And often sort of, just the creation of order and then, enhancing it basically with supplier to pull from doesn't really get decided until the day of the order when you're pulling a load from the terminal, right? So because of so much of variance in fuel pricing, there's a lot of confusion there. So that's a big leak where there's a lot of errors happen. And then second is drivers bringing back the paperwork from the field and really reconciling that, right? Companies we've seen multiple people, sometimes even teams involved in just reconciling paperwork. And, that's a big, big bottleneck that you're not able to in real time understand how the order was fulfilled.
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So, as just on the topic that Jed asked, right? Like each of these points basically could have multiple different paths, right? Like an order gets born in many ways. You're getting a call-in order, you're getting an email, you're monitoring tank monitors, you have recurring orders, keep fill orders. Same with scheduling. There's like 100 ways to schedule and do shift planning and so on, right? So there's all these permutations. And this is where sort of every business starts differing, right? And really to think about this is like when you have an order to cash automation, you want a system that will configure all these things so that you don't end up with, having one path of automation, but then the other paths are not automated. So you still have a lot of leaks, right? So once you sort of understand this concept, understand what sort of order to cash automation could do, let's look at what if you don't have order to cash automation, right? And what are some of, how does it manifest in your day-to-day operation? So number one, you're unable to send same-day invoices, right? This is something we discussed already, but really, you have multiple people who are required to reconcile. So there's a huge amount of staff that's spending time. Sometimes you have teams, and there's a big communication mess. Like reconciliation is you're trying to figure out what happened in the past. And because there is no context captured, you're calling your driver, you're calling Joe saying, hey, Joe, like what happened? You wrote here 40, but the customer ordered 400 gallons. Like what's going on? Then you're WhatsApping each other, and then one of your team members is on a leave, so you don't know really what happened with that order. So there's a huge communication mess, and that's leading to basically you not being able to invoice same day, right? Versus if you get to a point where same day invoicing is happening, if you have a question, you can quickly understand what's going on and, still fix things and send invoices. So that is one piece. You don't have this, you're unable to send same day invoice, right? Second, this is another interesting mental model. There's a concept called garbage in, garbage out, right? And if you don't have a good automation or good system in place, basically you're bringing garbage data or garbage information from the field, right? And then, of course, you can reconcile it as much as possible, but that garbage data still makes out to your back office system and to your customers, right? And really it comes down to you're slowly eroding trust with your customers because they're starting to see invoices from you that has mistakes. They're starting to see invoices from you that are not correct. The pricing is messed up. And that eroding of trust leads to basically delays in approval of invoices because now you are stuck into the accounts payable process of the customer and they want to make sure that all these invoices are correct. So this is a big sort of manifestation of slowdown, right? So not only you're sending your invoices slow or in a delayed way, but also, you don't have, your customers don't trust you anymore and those are getting delayed, right? This is the third mental model I'd like to touch upon, which is unless you have automation here, you'll see your team is fighting the same fires over and over again, right? Do this exercise after this session. Pull up your email, same day, last month, last week, same day of the week, last month, last year, and see if you were fighting the same fires. Were you dealing with the same kind of issues, whether it was like not getting information correctly, not having the context, sending incorrect invoices. So really the idea here is how can we touch paper one? Meaning if we touch it, if we find a problem, then we really plug the hole, right? Otherwise we have a challenge where you're just keeping above the water because you're just throwing the water out of your ship. Or worse, you're slowly sinking, right? And with a proper system in place, whether it's a process or software, now you can tweak it. When you plug the hole, you can add a feature, or you can, create a custom process so that it never breaks. Versus in the past, you add another spreadsheet to track, you create more training programs, and all that goes out of the window pretty much the next day, right? People are again making mistakes. So that is another challenge. Without this automation, you're fighting the same fire over and over again, right? And then the last way it results into is it really burns out your team, right? Almost everyone here have businesses that's been around for multiple decades. You have employees who've been extremely loyal, right? They've been with you for decades. But for years and years, they're fighting the same fires and they're not seeing progress. And really burnout happens because people are not seeing impact of their work. They're not being able to be creative. And, we see this all the time. When we go to customers, start implementing this software, the dispatch team, the accounting team love us because they now finally get to tell us all these ideas they had, all these creative ideas to make their own business better, right? But because there's so much firefighting every day that they don't get a chance to really kind of use that creative process. Jet, can you hear me? I got a pop-up around my microphone, but I'm hoping everything's correct.
I can still hear you. Yeah, thanks, Pavan.
Okay, great. I'll keep going. So those are some of the side effects, and these are the frameworks I want you to go back and think through. That how is this happening in my business, and what needs to be done so that we get out of this, right?
Yeah, and I'll just say one of the members commented for their own company and said, yeah, in my case, taking an order via phone, copying it over to paper, and then keying the order into the system, that introduces the most mistakes or leaks in their order pipeline.
There you go. Right. And we've seen companies where they have 6 different locations. They would take orders by phone, they'll print it out, then they'll fax it to a central location, and the central location actually prints them again, then tries to plan it, and then prints the shift planning, the entire shift, and then sends it back to each location, and then they deliver it. So, and these are the process they figured out 80 years ago, and then they're so afraid to change it because they know it works in whatever way, and changing it, basically they just don't know where they're going to land up, right? So but as we go through this, really there's still silver lining to this cloud, right? And that is that, look, if you're looking at your business and you still have all these problems, you still have all these leaks, and you're still surviving, in some cases thriving and growing, then you have this huge opportunity you're sitting on, right? Because as you start closing this, you can get really high leverage in your business. Your operating margin would go up. Your customer service would go up, right? Your team would get a little more creative. Your culture would start changing. So as much as it's a problem, but if you're able to survive this, then it's also a huge opportunity to really leverage and make some changes around this, right? So the number one question sort of I get as I talk about this is, well, but Pavan, we don't have time. And I'll tell sort of a story, a small thing that a mentor of mine said when we raised our last round of funding. He basically said, Pavan, you really need to slow down to be able to speed up, right? And the idea there was, okay, you do want to, you raised a round of funding. It's really for growth, but you can't grow the way you were operating right now, right? So you really need to slow down, put some processes in place, implement the software, hire the right people. That way you can speed up in a way that doesn't burn out people, that doesn't screw up the culture. And, it lets you grow in a non-linear fashion. And what does non-linear growth mean? If you're doubling your business, you should not double your staff, because otherwise you don't really have leverage, right? And to be able to do that, you need to start having this software and systems in place, right? So this is sort of another mental model I'll give you, which is slow down to speed up. Right? Sometimes we have so many of these initiatives on. We're trying to acquire a company. We're trying to acquire a location, launch new products. But basically, you have leaky pipelines, and those need to be fixed. Your ship may be sinking slowly. There's another few things I would touch upon. This is from heard on the street, right? What customers are saying. And this is a very interesting kind of analogy that was brought up, which is imagine your customer, right? It could be a convenience store owner, and they're ordering a pizza, right? The same person, they order a pizza, $15 pizza, and today, as soon as they place an order, they can see where the order is, what was placed. They can literally select what goes on each half of the pizza. They can see when the order, when your pizza is in the oven, right? Like they know that at 5:17 p.m. it's getting there and it's getting baked, and then there's a quality check, and they can see when the pizza is on its way, and they can track it. And once they get, their nice, fresh, warm pizza, they get a message saying, "How was your experience?" Someone takes their signature, right, and they're happy, right? And this is happening for literally a $20, $15 pizza. And then our customers here right now are ordering a load that is, today costs $60,000, $80,000. And for days, they don't know what the pricing would be. They haven't gotten an invoice, sometimes weeks. Sometimes they don't even know if it was delivered or if it's getting late. And, we think that, our industry doesn't really need to change in this way, but this is the same customer. They're ordering pizza every day. They're ordering Uber every day, right? So really it comes down to now 80% of our job is managing expectations and by communicating proactively, often and in real time. If your delivery is late, the customer needs to know. If it's rescheduled, the customer needs to know. If it's delivered, the customer needs to know, right? If the pricing changed, they need to know, right? If they have a question, they need to be able to contact you right away. So that is kind of a big change, shift in marketplace that has happened. And, the companies who would really change that and make this shift would really thrive in the new world, right? And the ones who don't, it's going to be super hard because, the customer expectations are now through the roof, right? So, and, one last kind of piece, example I'll give you is like, think about Uber, right? And a company like Uber, they're managing close to 4 million drivers worldwide, right? And they've got no dispatch. How many times have you called Uber dispatch? Or how many times the drivers are calling Uber dispatch, right? And still, the driver shows up on time. You can track them. You would know where the driver is exactly, right? You get into the car. The ride is done. You literally get, pay, settle the transactions right there, right? So the same kind of technology now is available to each one of us, right? The same smartphone, cloud-based technology is now available, and that's the thesis behind order-to-cash automation. Just to summarize, like think about leaky pipelines in your operation. Think about slowing down to speed up. Think about aiming for same-day invoicing. Think about avoiding garbage in, garbage out, so that you don't break the trust with your customer. And lastly, think about providing differentiated customer experience, right? Because if you don't do that, then you're basically just providing a commodity service, right? Like anyone in the same city that you operate, there's another marketer, there's another petroleum distributor that's operating. There's not much difference, right? Like it's basically commoditized. So unless you offer a differentiated customer experience, it's really fight to pricing to zero. So those are some of the ideas that I mentioned. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, quick question for you. I know you're not here to, sell your product, but to provide us education. But for these mental models and problems, I believe FleetPanda software solves many of that. Can you give us just a, real quick overview of how you solve these problems?
Yes, there's really three parts to, I would say, to the software. Number one is we have an end-to-end system that is very modular. So you can pick and choose which modules you want. And I can give you like a quick sort of sneak peek into the system just so that you understand. So this is sort of a real live dashboard that's showing sort of live transactions where the orders are and literally seeing sort of where the customer is, where the driver is, and visibility into sort of the load for the driver in real time, see what's on the truck and what is it carrying, right? So number one is we have this system built out, which is extremely modular and end-to-end. And modular means you get to select sort of, this is what our workflow is, right? Like the first thing we do when we onboard a customer is, we visit them and we map out their order pipeline. Like tell us what your order pipeline looks like. And then we configure our system to that. And that happens literally in days. And, you just need to use the modules that you need. The second piece is it's fully cloud-based and smartphone-based. That way you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. to implement it. It's literally like, your Gmail or Netflix account. You just log into your account and the system's there. Like, you don't need servers, none of that. And third, very interesting thing we offer is, we're continuing to offer that, which is a no-risk pilot, which is we let you put our system on just one or two trucks with real data, with real drivers, with real routes, and get end-to-end order-to-cash automation working before you roll it out. And it's no risk. And, any system you look out there, if they're not letting you try the system, you should be very cautious because, we've seen it time and around. The industry has been extremely burnt by vendors who promised them a lot, costed them $250,000 implementations that go on for multiple years, and they don't have anything to show for it, right? So that's a very interesting piece we offer, which is no risk trial, put it on two trucks, get it implemented. We've implemented, multiple of these now for different business models, truck and trailer, tank wagon, fleet fueling, wet hosing, transport, all of that under one single platform. So that will be my quick sort of spiel. If you want to learn more, of course, I love talking about this stuff. And if you want to, compare your operations with other folks in the industry, compare notes, or just get a demo of the system, I'm at pavan@fleetpanda.com. And you can also go to our website and just fill out a form or just email me with any question.
Great. Pavan, a couple quick questions for you. So suppose I'm a petroleum marketer using a common carrier. How can I bring automation to their side, my carrier side?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, 10 years back, it wasn't possible because systems that existed out there were really wired, right? You need to put like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 of hardware and all that system in place before you can even use automation. But now, like example, like FleetPanda system, it's fully smartphone based. So your common carrier literally uses their smartphone. It could be an Android iOS phone and just downloads the FleetPanda app and log into your operation. And then you literally track their driver as if they were your driver, right? So it's no different than Uber. Like right now, Uber can hire 20 drivers in your city and they just download the Uber driver app, and they're in the Uber system. So it's the same thing, like that technology is available, which is completely independent of the truck or the hardware they're using. All they need is a smartphone, and they're into your operation. You can send orders directly to their phone. You can track them. You can get receipts in real time and all of that.
Yeah, sounds good. And the second question is, another member said, we have difficulty with their back office software allowing an interface with third-party apps like yours or software companies. Have you crossed that, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, we have done multiple integrations with many back office systems out there. Every back office system at the very least offers a CSV import, which is you can just import a CSV. So we write those interface based on what back office you're using, right? So at the very least, you can at least export import CSV. But a lot of them also have API support and things like that. And we totally sort of we've done those integrations in place. And this is another thing we do when it comes to creating automations. Do you see my screen, Jed? I'm just showing a quick view for that.
I do, yeah.
So here's an example where these are the shifts that are waiting to be pushed into back office. You literally click a button. We pull up a batch of your entire shift, and that batch could then be selected further if you want just the AM drivers or PM drivers or just transport loads. And then that gets pushed to different back office. And in this case, it's talking about NetSuite as a back office system. It could be QuickBooks, it could be DM2, and so on, right? So we've kind of done those interfaces. But at the very least, we do CSV imports, and if API support is available, we also do that, right? So.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Pavan, so much. We need to keep moving here, but appreciate you stepping through some of the pain points that we have in order to cache automation. I'm really glad to know there's a system like yours out there that can help us solve some of those as we move forward. And to your point, get cash in our bank and in our pockets much more quickly, that's the most exciting part about this whole pipeline getting cash at the end of the day. So moving on, Cory Watson, president at Leykell Insurance. Cory, share with us a little bit about some of the things that we can do to protect ourselves against these rising prices and pain that our customers may be having right now and maybe not being able to pay us. One member joked in a comment, I only think it's a half joke, but how should I respond to my customers that tell us they're going to pay us after their customers pay them?
Yeah, unfortunately that's pretty normal, when you hear that. So yeah, I can address that. But thanks for having me on it. I'm looking at this graphic like we talked about a little earlier, and I think my graphic's a little low, for regular gas at 233. So should probably updated that. But so yeah,
I think it's 475 in my town right now.
Yeah, it's 429, I guess, premium up the road. So anyways, we're here. So yeah, I'm going to talk about what are our options to protect our receivables and kind of what's happening right now in regards to what we can do with gas prices being up. I'm going to speak a little bit about real problems that our clients are telling us in regards to problems fuel companies are facing. They're seeing credit limit restrictions from their suppliers. So if I'm a fuel distributor and I'm purchasing fuel, my credit limit is shrinking with what I could buy. So $1 million credit limit, maybe 700,000 now. So that's creating trouble where maybe my supplier is reaching out to me asking for financial data that they haven't really done in a while, or they're holding me down for how much I could buy. And we know in the fuel world that can be a problem because you need to buy as much as you can to sell as much as you can. So new customers are now coming to you for credit because maybe they've maxed out their credit limit with another supplier. One of their other suppliers is unwilling to increase their limit. So now you're seeing new customers where maybe you have no history with them. So you're doing some due diligence and analysis on new customers. Current customers' balances, they're exceeding their credit limit. They're bumping up against it, and you have to make a decision. Do we increase their limit? How much risk are we willing to take, or what risk measures can we take to hedge against that as well? We're seeing stressed credit teams that are managing obviously abnormally high balances, and sales and credit tension between sales wanting to push sales and a credit team having to play both sides there, where they want to increase sales but they have to protect the company they are as well. Obviously larger than normal exposures. It's a interesting time. So there's some C-level folks probably losing sleep at night, credit managers as well, about certain customers' balances, even though you feel that they're most likely going to pay you. So all that's happening right now based upon the price of fuel, and there's other stuff beyond this that's happening. So I'm going to talk about a couple tools that we can use to fix all this. Right, one, it's a fairly new product, and I don't know if many of the folks on the call today have heard about this, but it's a product that's commonly used in Europe. There's a group out of the UK that's come in, and they are expanding what's used in the UK into America. And out of that, it's a bond. They're calling them micro bonds that can be used to guarantee your receivable up to 100% coverage. So that's dollar for dollar in the result of losses. No excess, no deductibles, no credit limit fees. It's just a bond that you purchase to guarantee the receivable. They're a 12-month, up to 12 months. You could do a 3-month or 6-month. They're up to 12 months, and they're non-cancelable contracts, unlike certain other mechanisms that where companies could get off cover for risky accounts. They're fully flexible. It's a fully flexible instrument that runs alongside maybe an existing credit insurance policy, or it could replace your credit insurance or whatever type of existing security that you have. It's centralized. There's a standardized platform for full contract and visibility. That means there's a portal, an online portal where you would have access to see which bonds are in place, which ones are expiring, and your customer would have the same visibility. Your bank, if needed, would have that same visibility, your broker as well, anyone involved. It's a centralized system. The beauty of this also, claims are paid in 24 to 48 hours from the time that you have a customer that defaults. You could theoretically one day after they default, file a claim, and the money's in your account in 24 to 48 hours, dollar for dollar. So it's a really interesting product that again is fairly new to the market. So we have partnered with these folks to sell this to our fuel customers. The downside to microbonds is that they're fairly new to the market, and the bonding companies are very, very selective on who they want to offer these to. So they're really, for now, harder to qualify. But we have run many of these through, been successful in some, and some that we thought would be successful were not. So they're harder to qualify, and then the pricing is a little bit higher than your traditional credit insurance, because naturally these are non-cancelable and dollar for dollar coverage.
So Cory, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. I'm putting this on this micro bond on a particular customer, or is it a group of customers that I'm putting it on?
So they like to see a group of customers. So like BP, as an example, BP utilized this program, and they have all of their customers on this microbond platform. So how it would work with a jobber, let's say, is they want to purchase from you, and you would send them a link that says log in and apply for your bond. In 10 minutes, that bond is approved or not approved, and then that uploads into both systems that says, yeah, now I have a bond in this program, and now I can sell to them on open terms. So the client could pay for it, the fuel distributor could pay for it, and it could be invisible to their customer if they don't want that C-store to have to do that. They could split the cost, however it works, but you're correct.
Okay, so a group of customers, or all my customers, I'm kind of buying this micro bond against.
Correct. They're not looking for a one-off situation that says I've got one customer and I want to buy a bond. They really want a spread of risk. So, that could be a downside or an upside, but they're looking for a big spread.
Okay.
So that's what's coming. There's more to come on that, but I mean, contact us for more information on this if you'd like, because it could be a disruptor in the credit insurance world, and we're keen to that, and we meet with them all the time, and we're one of their partners. So the other method, which I assume many of you are using credit insurance on this call, but for those that aren't using credit insurance, I'll give you a couple minutes on kind of what it is if you're not familiar. But credit insurance it's simply an insurance policy that guarantees your receivables from non-payments. So if you have a policy, you invoice a customer, they don't pay the bill, then you can file a claim, whether it's 1 day late or 60 days late or 90, doesn't matter. You file a claim, the insurance company will try to collect it, and then they will pay you on day 61. Between 30 and 60 days, they're going to pay you for whatever's owed. It can be quickly used to screen new customers. So right now, if you're having those folks come to you because they're tapped out on their other suppliers' credit limits, you can utilize credit insurance as a tool to take a company's name and you can put it in a database. The carriers have extensive databases with information on your customers, and it could come back with less than 5 minutes that says, this is their risk score, this is their amount of coverage, or these guys are not good, you should not sell to them. All of this happens in under 5 minutes, so it's good. It also allows you to give, obviously, new customers credit that you would have otherwise turned away, and extend higher limits to your current customers with no risk. So that's important now as you have customers broaching, their credit limits. It also, provides additional level of support for credit managers. I mean, if you have a credit management team that is supposed to do this work and vet customers, but what we've seen is our customers that, as long as their client is paying them, then they don't really have a need to go back and pull the financials on that company or to double check them, unless they're super sophisticated or have the time to do that for 1,000 customers or so. So these credit insurance companies, they're doing that all day. That's their job. So they provide sort of a backstop and additional support for credit managers to help their job. It also eases that traditional sales and credit tension where right now, credit managers may be more conservative or they're more keen to exposures, and sales just wants to continuously, sell more gallons. And
Cory, I was going to say, it's interesting. I remember a study group member telling me their mental thought process was originally, I don't need credit insurance. And why? Because I don't have any bad debt. But then they asked themselves, why don't I have any bad debt? Well, it's because I only do business with people that I trust, and everybody that I don't trust, I don't do business with. And they thought, well, if I had credit insurance, now that opens me up to do business with these firms that I would otherwise pass on because I have some protection against it, and ultimately get a bigger book of business out there. And I just thought that mental thought process of what they went through was interesting. I don't know, what the right answer is. That's individual for each company, but it was interesting to hear their thought process.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge is when credit insurance as a whole is brought up, companies immediately look at, well, I don't have any losses. I have a credit team that's going to protect me from losses. But when that happens, if we could do an analysis on the next slide, actually, I have one that speaks to a live customer of ours with that same conversation. So I can maybe address that on the next slide, but you're 100% right. One last piece, though, I would say regarding credit insurance over a micro bond or so would be that there are additional bank benefits. If companies now are looking at their bank lines, credit insurance as a whole can name a bank the beneficiary on their AR, and you can get higher advance rates, 90% or so from your bank, and eliminate concentration ratios that banks typically kick out. So if you could get better financing while you're having an insurance policy to help me grow my gallons, while you're protecting yourself from non-payments, that's sort of the win-win across the board. So I always have to bring up cost and structure just because I get it so much. So I'm going to touch on it real quick. These credit insurance policies can be a full policy that says I'm going to insure everyone, or it can be a segmented policy where they say I don't want to insure my propane, I don't want to insure lubes, or however you want to segment it. Most policies have zero deductibles. There are something called a blanket limit, like a discretionary limit that says I'm going to name my top 100, and below that I'll just sort of draw a line and insure everybody below that under one limit. Makes the policy really easy to administer. Most policies pay out between 90 and 95% indemnity. $100,000 loss, they'll pay you 90 to 95,000. Claims paid are within 30 to 60 days from filing a claim. And premium estimate. So it's always a tricky question, but I will say right now, when the pandemic started, there's no way this was happening. But right now, the going rate for a fuel distributor is about $20 to insure one truck. So for every 9,000 gallons, it's about $20 or less to insure that. So if you think about that, at $4 a gallon, 9,000 gallons is $36,000 worth of exposure, and the cost to insure that's $20. So it's something, if you haven't explored, you might want to look at it to protect yourself in that regard. These costs are factored by multiple factors, but the top four would be most likely sales volume. The higher the sales volume, the lower the rate. The quality of buyers. If you're selling to a bunch of dogs, then it would be higher than someone who sold to a bunch of Amazons, let's say. Shorter terms are better than longer terms. And then loss history. If you're not writing off a bunch of bad debt, your rate will be lower as well. Sort of how a policy is structured, among things. So I included this because it's kind of hard to see, but I wanted to include this because this is just a snapshot of, we try to do a ROI analysis on all of our clients, and this is a current customer today where we had them send us the accounts. They're pretty conservative. The accounts they've turned away over the last 18 months. So I didn't put their customer name, of course, for privacy, but I put the amount of coverage that that particular client was looking to get. So you'll see that under coverage. And then the policy cost of coverage, that's how much that limit costs of the company. The next column is the annual revenue that account's going to have. We're assuming 10-day terms. They're going to turn that 36 times a year, which represents the total annual gallons. So if you'll look at like the second row down, that $50,000 limit, it's going to cost them $900 to get a $50,000 limit. That's $1.8 million of revenue, or 450,000 gallons. So that represents an annual profit of $9,000 on that one account, because we were able to insure it, which gave them the strength to be able to go and sell to that company. So at the bottom of this, you'll see in summary that, you've got, 2.2 million in coverage. Let's say the premium for all of these accounts represents 40,950, and that's an extra 20 million gallons that they're selling for an additional profit minus the credit insurance cost of 368,000. So they spent 40 grand to make 368. So it was a real big win in this scenario. And I'm assuming a $4 a gallon and the cost per gallon to be 0.002 per gallon.
Well, sounds good. I appreciate it, Cory. All the ideas on one, micro bonding is a new thing, and then also credit insurance. And I know people will be happy to reach out to you with any questions that they have. So we'll go ahead and move on to Ann and close with you, Ann Pitts, who's president of the Pitts Group. And Ann, I'm curious what you would say to that question that one of the members asked, which is, my customer's telling me they'll pay me after they get paid. What should I say to them?
I know exactly what I would say. I would say, you know what, when that happens in my business, I go to my bank line of credit, which is what I operate on when I have a cash flow shortfall. I mean, honestly, they're using you for a bank line of credit, probably with no interest rate. That's just what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, yeah, I just want to give you guys, and I think this has been a wonderful webinar, because you've taken to the members an outside resource, which is a great software. You've got insurance, which covers your rear end from an outside perspective. And then I wanted to talk about an inside resource within your own company, what you could do today after you finish this webinar. Go into your staff and talk about 5 things that you can do today to help mitigate some of this risk, high risk atmosphere that we're in right now. It's a little uncertain, actually, with the price of product being as high as it is. It's tough on your customer base. So I want to remind you guys, some of this stuff employees might be aware of, been heard of in the past, but they have to be not just taught, they have to be reminded. So let's go in and talk about number 1, identify and report customer red flags. This is flags your customers are throwing off that are signs of stress. You've got to tell your employees, to be on the lookout for this. Who's on the lookout? Your salespeople, your drivers, your customer service people, certainly your credit team. I mean, it reminds me of a story. I was out on site with a customer. I was standing at a counter with the credit manager and the owner, and we were looking at a bankruptcy petition that had just come in the door. I just happened to be there. And a driver walked behind us, and he heard us talking, and he just said, well, I could have told you that from a mile away. And we all stopped and went, what? And he said, oh, they've been throwing off red flags for months now. That facility looks bad. People have been leaving. I'm like, well, why didn't you say something? And he said, well, nobody asked. So make sure your team knows that you care to hear this kind of stuff, to be on the lookout, remind them of that. And then how do you train them? You have to talk about what they need to be looking for. And some of the big red flags that I have identified, I've made a list here: change in business ownership, third-party payments. Anytime you get a check from an attorney or a CPA that's a different payment source, that is a major red flag. change in business side appearance, change in payment behavior. Are they paying you a little later? Are they paying you a little earlier in smaller increments, you know, on their invoicing? That can be a sign that there's some stress going on. Management behavior, are they hard to get on the phone? Are your people able to talk to their contacts they've always visited with, or is there some avoidance going on? Ordering habits, are they ordering less product? Are they ordering more product, maybe trying to get stocked up? You know, all these things can be, and one or two, it's just that, it's just a flag. When you get a cluster of flags, then you have a real problem. So when you talk about training staff, you could throw these red flags on a spreadsheet, which is what I've done right here. Distribute it to your folks, say, hey, watch for this stuff. It even gives them a point system. You could give them a piece of paper, you could give them the spreadsheet itself. If anybody wants this, a copy of this with what red flags that I've kind of put together, call me, email me, I'd be happy to send it to you. You can, you know, kind of change it up to what you've experienced in your business. So when those red flags go off, what do you do? What do you do next? I'm going to tell you a real concise, simple thing to do is a quick credit review. Credit review is a proactive way to run a credit department. Somebody's throwing off red flags. The first thing you do is charge whoever it is, your credit manager or, you know, a clerk underneath, run a new credit report. What's happening with recent payment trends and UCC filings? That's going to tell you what's happening more recently. Can you benchmark that against a previous credit report? That's always a really good exercise. Review the 12-month rolling order and payment history. How has that changed? How has that been adjusted, especially on the payment side? In the credit review, I would pull out their original credit application. Did they sign a personal guarantee? Do you have that in your hip pocket? Do you happen to have financial statements that you can, again, review and benchmark? Are there any negative reports that you're hearing that need to be a part of that credit review? And, you know, take a look at their current credit limit. Are we comfortable with that right now? A lot of your customers are going to be going way over their credit limits with pricing like it is. So once you get those red flags, put them through a credit review and see what they look like. And I want to comment real quickly. Your credit staff is really stressed right now. They're going to be having more and more collection activity potentially. The customer's throwing off red flags. So also give some thought to maybe some things, administrative things you might take off of them temporarily anyway, that you could push to a customer service person just to kind of free them up to do some of this proactive stuff like credit reviews when customers are looking a little stressed. All right, so information's gathered. What do you do next? Well, you have to have a conversation. You have to get on the phone or go visit the customer and just have a business partner, you know, conversation about what's happening. You have to make the decision, is this somebody that we want to work through a tough time, or is it somebody that we need to, you know, go ahead and cut the relationship? Customers that you help through a tough time will be loyal to you forever. I mean, it's one of the best way to buy that wonderful relationship when you can help them get through a tough time. And sometimes just giving them good business advice is part of that working through. All right, number 3, your team has got to be exercising right now superior collections. This means that that has to take priority over some of the other things that they might have on their plate to do. You've got to bring them into the A-team status. They're going to have to touch customers early, friendly, and frequently. Those are the people that get paid when customers become stressed. It's the ones that know your expectation. If you don't touch them, you're just going to have more and more of their vendors piling up on top of you that are probably going to get paid before you do. So, you know, what do your collectors' days look like? I would talk to them about it. You know, what's your process? How do you could walk down the hall right after this is over and have these conversations. What do you do first? You know, and I think broken promises at this point, when somebody tells, that's the goal of a collection call. You either get the money right then or you get a promise. Once you get a promise, you need to track when that promise takes place. If it doesn't happen on March 30th, on March 31st, that needs to be the first phone call early in the morning. Collection calls are best started early in the morning. And I'm talking about 8 o'clock when people start answering their phones. Then you have the rest of the day for folks to call you back and do the things that are follow-up. High dollar customers, of course, are of importance, and the problem accounts, the ones that you just are worrying the owners, are worrying the people that are looking at the aging. So if your collection people are still following the same process they were following 6 weeks ago, which might be send out friendly reminders to the people that are 5-day past due, that's important. That might not be the most important thing today. It's changed somewhat. You need to be getting push summary reporting is what I would suggest more now than ever. Just summary means who's in these buckets where you don't have to sift through that whole aging. Push once a week, push twice a week. What does our 30-day look like? What is our 60? What is our 90? If you want a KPI just for the collection department, the Collection Effectiveness Index is a really good one. Number 4, negotiation authority. Make sure your collectors are authorized to negotiate on a call. If the dollar amount is huge, they might not be the one that needs to make the call. Shorter terms, lower payments, or some type of negotiation that customers might be attracted to, just paying additional dollars on top, setting out a balance in a note with payments, but they need to be have the authority to make those decisions. Number 5, and I'm going to end up right here, know the escalation plan. If your collectors are calling and calling and calling and they're being ignored, what's the next step? Is it your CFO that calls? Is it an owner that calls? You got to escalate it within your building before you go to a third party, would be my advice, before you go to that actual collection agency or attorney. So there's my 5. Anybody has any questions? There's my contact info. I'd be happy to visit with you about any of this stuff.
And real quickly, where do you find that credit departments fall apart the most? What's the lowest hanging fruit or needle to move?
They fall apart the most, I think, on not having good communication with the salespeople, with management, with what needs to come out of that department. I think there needs to be a real organized group effort on what the expectation is. And again, try to remove as much of that piddly stuff as you can from their plates, like mailing statements, for a good example.
That makes a lot of sense. And I loved your point about, it's important to teach them. It's also important to remind them of what they've been taught, and kind of that continual brushing of your teeth, so to speak, is really important.
Right.
Well, yeah, great tips and tricks here, Ann, for somebody to implement internally. If you, as a member, need some help implementing this, give Ann a call. She'll help you out, get your department all together. So we'll go ahead and stop here. We're at the top of the hour, but I really appreciate Pavan, Cory, Ann, all the thoughts. Cash is the lifeblood of our organizations, and in this time of high fuel prices, we need all the help we can get. So focus on what you can control, members, and hope you have a terrific day, and appreciate you being on the call. We will send out the slides with contact information for each of these people so you can get back in touch with them if you have any further questions. Thank you guys all. Take care.